Right. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Slow Down podcast. Today, we have money coach and personal finance educator Shay Richter of Front Porch Finances. She's also author of the book Budget Burnout: 12 Weeks to Get Out of Your Budget Slump and Accelerate Your Goals. I was lucky enough to have Shay on the podcast back in June of 2023, which feels like a really long time ago now. That was episode 26, which I will link so you can go back and check that out again. We had a really insightful conversation about incorporating financial goals with a slower mindset and how living slower can go hand in hand with simplifying your expenses, simplifying everything, really. Since then, Shay has moved her young family of four overseas to Portugal. They had been living in Washington state. So they moved overseas, and her husband have retired early. So today we're going to discover how on earth they did that and how it's going for them. So welcome back to the podcast, Shay.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. So excited to hear your story today and learn from you and hear how it's going. So if you wouldn't mind, let's start with just a little background information of how, how this all came to be, the early retirement and then this move. And, it's a lot. It's not just you and your husband. You have two young girls. So you have a lot of balls in the air and a lot of things to consider in your life. And so curious to see what inspired you to make these changes and how it's all going.
Yeah, so way back in probably 2014, I was a huge fan of Mr. Money Mustache. I don't know if you know who that is, but he is also someone who retired early, um, a little more extreme than I am. But so it was prior to having kids, and I just got this notion in my head that that's what I wanted to do. Eventually, I put it on the back burner. We had a lot of debt at the time. It wasn't realistic for a long time for us. But once we decided to pay off all of our debt, we kind of just kept going with our same lifestyle as our wages grew and saved more and more, knowing that in the long run we wanted to move abroad and retire early. The main reason that we decided to do this was for our kids. We wanted to teach them a slower pace of life. We wanted to be in closer proximity to other countries, teach them different cultures, different languages. Um, and also, Portugal is one of the safest countries in the world. So, safety was a huge one for us.
So interesting. Had you been to Portugal many times prior to this?
No, actually, moving here was my first time in Europe, my first time in Portugal, my first time really going abroad. I went to Mexico one other time, but other than that, I hadn't really been anywhere.
Wow. So back up for a second. So you had never been there and you had decided this was the place to go. This was the
Yes.
place that like relocate and live. I feel like some people, they do an insane amount of research just to take a vacation, but you are literally moving there. So like you said, Portugal has been ranked really safe. Where did you get the idea of Portugal? I mean, you can live anywhere.
Um, I did a lot of research when I was into Mr. Money Mustache about like places we could go. I read a lot of stories of people moving abroad to get their like cost of living down. And so for us, we really wanted to move somewhere in Europe. That was a big one for us. Somewhere that was super friendly, where either everyone or a lot of people spoke English. Um, Low cost of living. I can't remember. I said that already. And then safety. And so it had been on our list. Spain was also on our list. I can't remember if there was anywhere else. And then I stumbled upon someone on YouTube, a family called Our Rich Journey, and they had actually retired in Portugal. So I was able to get a lot more information of what that looked like and what their lifestyle looked like, and it seemed to line up a lot with what we wanted. So then it kind of narrowed my search from um, Spain, Portugal to just Portugal.
Okay. Wow. Wow. And prior to moving, so you owned a house in Washington, right? You sold.
Yes.
So tell us about that whole transition.
So when we decided December to move to Portugal. Our original goal was to retire by 36. So I just turned 35, so it would have been next year. But Portugal was having some law changes, and we kind of just had to jump in last minute. So one night over dinner, I looked at my husband and I said, I think now is the time, we got to do it. We were in the middle of a kitchen renovation, so we had to quickly do a kitchen renovation and get our house on the market. But we own the house with my dad. It was a multi-generational house, so he lived downstairs, we lived upstairs, and we split pretty much everything. And we had um, quite a bit of equity in it because we bought it pre-pandemic. So we were able to utilize the money from the sale of that home to finish funding our retirement slash get us here slash save up enough money to buy a house in a little bit here.
Wow. So, and then what months did you actually move? So that was December where you decided that this needs to happen.
June. We moved middle of June. So it gave us 6 months to finish the kitchen renovation, list our house, sell everything we own practically, and just go for it.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty quick. And how long would you say it took to get settled once you got over there?
We spent the first 2 weeks vacationing around Portugal, and then it probably took us another month or so. Like we just needed to furnish the house, make it feel a little more homey. Um, but the people of Portugal are so welcoming and kind. They make you feel comfortable really quickly, which is nice.
I've been there once. I was there right before the pandemic for a quick little girls' weekend, and I noticed that as well. It's just a beautiful country, beautiful people. So I'm glad that, you're finding that. When you got off the plane, I'm just wondering, like when you first stepped into Portugal and saw it, like, how did you feel? Did you feel like we're home, or was it just so scary? I can't even imagine.
I definitely felt nervous. It was a overnight flight that I had a kid on each side of me, knowing that like I don't sleep. I was like, I might as well stay with the kids and let my husband sleep since he was going to have to drive us to our new house in a new country, and so I didn't sleep at all. So I was already just like so tired, so nervous, and you were just hit with the humidity. Where I'm from in Washington, it's desert, so that was already like a huge change, and it just was so green and beautiful. And I remember being in awe a lot, like driving. Our house is about an hour from the airport, so driving, and I also got really car sick because I was like, oh, look at that old building. Oh, look at that. But yeah, I remember just thinking it's beautiful, and I didn't necessarily feel like home yet. It still felt like a dream, kind of.
It's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had your house, you had lined up a house to rent prior to moving there?
Yes, as part of the visa that we got a retirement visa, and you have to have like a year lease set in place. And it's not easy to find somewhere to rent halfway across the world. But I lucked out and found someone else from the US who had moved to Portugal, and she was moving somewhere else and was like, hey, my landlord speaks English if anyone is needing an apartment for their visa. And that's kind of just how we ended up in this apartment in this town. It wasn't planned, just fell into our lap.
Wow. Sometimes that's the best way. It just falls into place if it's meant to
Yes,
be.
yes.
That's amazing. And then the kids. So how old are your girls?
7 and 5. And so far, they are loving a lot of Portugal. My oldest one is having a smidgen of a hard time in school, but she's still doing really well. And my youngest just loves it. She has friends everywhere. It's so fun to watch kids play. Like they don't speak the same language, but they just love to play, and all the kids are so sweet. They're so nice.
Isn't that amazing? The play is the universal language for them. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter, right?
Hmm.
Do most of the like do their teachers speak English? Like how did they do this? How did they switch to a new school in a new country?
Well, my oldest goes to a very small school, and her teacher does speak English. She actually was born in the US and moved here when she was a kid. So she has a similar experience to my daughter, which I think was kind of helpful, and also made my daughter feel more relaxed knowing that she had someone to talk to. My youngest, her teacher speaks very, very, very minimal English, um, but there are parents who speak English, and help us communicate when necessary. Uh, but the teachers here are very loving, and they're very like huggy, kissy, like you feel the love when you walk into like the school with the teachers and the staff and everything, which is really nice. So even though, yeah, we don't communicate, or they couldn't communicate right away with my youngest, she still felt like a lot of love. And her teacher told me last week that she's pretty much understands everything that the teacher says. So that's good.
That's amazing. Well, they say they pick it up so fast when they're young, so she'll become bilingual in no time, I would imagine.
I cannot wait because I need help.
Exactly. She'll be your translator.
Mm-hmm.
Got to learn how to read.
Yes.
Wow, it's just it's really fascinating to me. I mean, I've heard of, and I'm not sure if it's that same family that you found on YouTube, but I remember when I went over to Lisbon with my a good friend of mine, she had said, "Oh, that yeah, there's." She had been telling me like how safe it's supposed to be, and this family that she had followed that had moved over there, and it's kind of how she stumbled on us traveling there just for a long weekend. But it's just really interesting to me to have this idea of making this type of like a life change at this age. You
Yeah.
guys are so young and your kids are so young. And this is a very outside of the box concept, probably for most people listening, but um, for me as well. But I have to say, like, it's definitely something like I feel like I could dream about doing this because it just sounds really nice. And it sounds like it's really aligned with, living a slower pace and simplifying things and really focusing on what matters, which is my whole inspiration for having this podcast and having these conversations. So, you really have embodied all of this to the fullest in your life. And how did you when I was listening to our last podcast, you were the goal was to retire around 40 and now you said you're 35. So you bumped that way up. And I feel like most of the time people are like, oh, this is my goal. And then it gets pushed back, 5, 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you're 50, 55. Like, okay, thought I was retiring 10 years ago, but you bumped it up. You accelerated everything. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you and your husband do it? And how have you planned I mean, you have a lot of life, God willing, a lot of living ahead of you. So how did you plan for this? And how'd you
Um, Pretty much I think I kind of mentioned before, once we paid off debt, it's like our income just kept increasing, but we just kept our lifestyle the same. And that was really helpful. My husband and I are also very much on the same page. He also wanted to retire. He also wanted to move abroad. So I think that helped us immensely. The the biggest one towards the end was just um, that our income grew substantially. His income grew substantially, and our house appreciated a lot. Like if it wouldn't have appreciated like it did, this probably wouldn't have been possible for another few years. So I think we were very lucky with that
Sure,
aspect.
sure. And
There,
it's hard to, you said his income, he was just really getting going with his career. And what was his career in, by the way?
he was an electrical engineer in the nuclear industry,
Okay.
and yeah, he just graduated from college like 3 weeks before our youngest was born. So it hasn't even been 6 years since he graduated from college.
Wow.
Um, but I think that also just goes to show that like if your mind is set on something, like you can get it done.
Yes.
And
Yes. I feel like a lot of people listening are probably like, oh, if he clearly was doing well at his job and he was being promoted and making more money. That's a tough thing to walk away from, especially
it
just
is.
for building that momentum, 5, 6 years, you are just in the grand scheme of
Yes.
the lifetime of a career. That is like, you're still in the very beginning stages. So how do you walk away
Yeah.
from
I think it was a little hard for him. He actually really enjoyed his job, and he was in the middle of a big project. And like I said before, it wasn't our original plan to come this year. It just kind of happened. But now he's to the point where he's like, I don't think I could go back to work again.
quickly adjusted to that one, huh?
Yep. He's like, oh, this is nice.
So walk us through what a typical day would look like for you guys over here now, retired in your 30s.
Yeah. Like a typical school day, it's school starts like 9 o'clock here. So we kind of just like take our time in the mornings. And our kids currently go to two different schools. Next year they won't, but currently they do. So my husband takes one, I take the other. My youngest, her school is like a 5 minute walk from our house. So we walk, and it's so like lovely walking in the mornings. You see all the people coming from the markets, and there's all like the bread shops and the cafes and the flower shops, and like everyone just is so energetic in the mornings. um but we go to school, drop her off, I come home, my husband and I sit and drink our coffee, we read books, we I do some work, he helps me with some work stuff now that I don't have like a 9 to 5 job. I don't work that much, but he helps me with the like back end stuff or like IT stuff or things like that. It's nice every day we have lunch together, like it's like a little date, and that's something we didn't get before. Your husband comes home from work, and then you have to get the kids ready, and then by the time it's bedtime, everyone's exhausted. So it's nice to just spend time together. Um, Sometimes we watch TV shows, sometimes we go for walks or like little adventures in town. Uh, we pick up the kids, we do homework. I mean, it's very simple. We have dinner, we get ready for bed.
And how about the kids? Are kids over there as scheduled? Here it's like all these everybody's just seems to be it's the norm to have them in a sport every season and a million other extracurriculars and the lessons for this and the tutoring for that. Your kids are still a little bit young, but I think over
Mhm.
here you would be in the thick of it already. How is
And we were, before we left, we had piano, we had ballet, we had gymnastics. And now currently we have nothing. We are maybe looking to add a dance class or something. But a big difference is like the kids have a lot of like time to themselves. So they have 2 hour lunch breaks at school. So they eat lunch and then they get to like play and have free time for a long time. Also gives the teacher time to rest and like regroup before coming back. And then after school, if you want, there is like it's very inexpensive, but your kids could do like dance class one day after school, or they call it gymnastics, but it's more like PE, um, English class. And so if you wanted to add those things, you could, but it's like an extra 45 minutes. Uh, but perfect for like parents, both parents that are working or something, put your kids in some things. But no, not a lot of people do extracurricular activities. There isn't, well, there's not football, like American football here. Soccer, football, European soccer, you know what I'm saying. It's
Yep.
not happening right now. I don't think. I haven't seen any like leagues or anything. There just isn't a lot of, I think they just want kids to be kids. There's a
Okay.
lot of playing. There's
Yep.
a lot of, yeah, just playing.
Which, I mean, all the research says that's the best way for a kid to really become creative and use their imagination and just be allowed to be a kid. I think over here
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't let them be kids, and um, it's such a fleeting time. It goes really fast. So
Mm-hmm.
let them have their childhood, and it doesn't need to be overly structured and scheduled and have everything be led by adults. They need to figure it out themselves. One of my daughters, my youngest, who's 10, one of her favorite things, and I love that she loves it and that she has a few little friends in our neighborhood. I know that's not always the case where everybody might not always be, the safest place, or they might not have other kids, but she's got a couple other little girls in the neighborhood. And, if it's a nice day after school, she's hoping, okay, do I have a practice today? Like, am I free? Because they get on their bikes, they pick each other up and they just go. They go explore. They end up in somebody's backyard, on a trampoline or playing hide
Mm-hmm.
and seek or whatever, just being creative and making up a game. Like they made this game up the other day with using a soccer goal and just playing. And
Yeah.
all the research says that's really the best thing for them as kids,
Mm-hmm.
and they love doing it. It's just nice. It's a win-win for everybody. I'm not driving her around to a million things. Like she's just off doing her thing, and I know where she is. She's close by, and so I
Mm-hmm.
realize that we are very lucky that we live in a place where she can do that. But there's plenty of ways to kind of access that as well.
Hmm.
It could be at home, just having a friend over, but just not having everything be so structured. So
Yeah.
it's nice to
My
have that.
my youngest is in she's of kindergarten age, but here in Portugal they don't actually start school till first grade. So she is in this kindergarten class. They don't practice writing, they don't practice anything. They do crafts, they sing, they dance, they play, and she's living her best life. She loves it so
I bet.
much.
And you know
But
what?
I'm
All
like,
those things will help her when she starts doing those things next year.
yes.
It's all connected.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think, yeah, if she was in kindergarten in the US right now, she would be starting to read, which, studies have shown that necessarily reading earlier doesn't mean you're going to be a better reader. But yeah, just such a different dynamic.
Such a different philosophy. And at the end of the day, everybody in Portugal learns how to read and write and be productive as just as we do. Like
Yes.
it all evens out.
Hmm.
Keep making it earlier and earlier over here, making them do, and they're not
Yeah.
necessarily ready at that age. And and especially I've noticed here, and I think a lot of it's sports related, is that some people are not really following the cutoff, so they're sending their kids to school. Their children could potentially be a year older than the other kids in the class. So you have this really wide range of how developed they are, physically,
Hmm.
mentally, and all of that. So, they all
Yeah.
catch up in their own time. And I just love that I love that she's living her best life at 5.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I kind of want to live her life.
I know. I'm like, that sounds like a great time. Yeah. And even other kids will go to the park and it's weird. You'll see kids without parents, like not young kids, but like oh, maybe like middle school kids. They'll walk to the park by themselves and play. It reminds me a lot of like the 90s growing
Yep.
up where you don't see kids on their cell phones. You don't see a lot of even parents like sitting on their cell phones. It's such a different thing. Like
Yeah.
everyone has cell phones, like all the parents do, but it's people are just enjoying the moment and enjoying the time, and that's really nice. It's teaching us to get off our phones.
Yes, it definitely is. And it's really being a great model for the kids too, that
Hmm.
there's other ways to live. We don't have to be attached to this thing all the time. So what are some
Yes.
other, this is a perfect segue. I was going to ask you just like some other things that you've been noticing over there that are, more aligned with that simpler, slower type of lifestyle as opposed to your former life.
Um, I think one huge thing here is that like everything is super kid friendly. You can just take the kids anywhere, so you don't have to like worry about leaving them with someone or not doing something you want to do because you have the kids with you. I think that makes exploring here really fun because so often we run into events that we didn't know were going on or like festivals or things, and it's nice that we can just take the kids wherever. And like adults here really love kids and they cherish kids, and it doesn't feel like a burden to take them anywhere. I really enjoy that, and I think it ties into like living a slower lifestyle in not rushing around to like, yeah, take your kid here or there, or, you know, whatever. um I think this is a weird one, but like mail, you know how we just like in the US we get so much mail every single day, and there's ads and there's all these things. I get like no mail. I think I get 3 pieces of mail a month, and like not having to think about
Huh,
checking the mail every day
yeah.
or like what bills are hanging out in the mail. It's I don't know if that's weird, but
It
I
is,
really
well, it's
enjoy.
really different. That is really different because here, even if you're not expecting, like, I mean, who really gets a letter anymore? Once in a blue moon, you get something that, an actual kind of letter in the mail. But
Yeah.
generally, it's all just stuff that they're sending us. And how about all the Amazon trucks and all the Amazon deliveries and stuff?
Oh, you can order through Amazon Spain if you really want to. But with deliveries here, you have to be home. So you can't just like go and order things whenever you want because you have to be home to receive the package. And
That's
that was
huge.
something different. Yeah. Uh,
You have like a post office box kind of thing that gets packages, or no? That's not really.
no, you can send them to little stores around town will accept packages for you, and then you can go pick them up from there. So sometimes I do that if I don't know if I'm going to be home when the package arrives. But yeah, it's so wild to me. So you don't order as much because or else you'd have to be home all the time to receive your packages.
So you're really not living in the Amazon Prime world that we are over here. Because I mean,
No,
it's like a constant. I mean, I live in the country too, suburbia, but it's just constant. I know what times of day they're just constant Amazon trucks and UPS.
yes. And where we live, we can, it's a 5 minute walk to the mall if we, and the malls here are vastly different than the malls in the United States. They have like grocery stores, doctor's offices. They have all sorts of things within the mall, but it's like a 5 minute walk to the mall, to the meat shop, to the bread store, to the bakery. So it's like you don't have to order everything because you can easily just walk to wherever it is that you need to get something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And how about the food? Have you noticed a big change in the food?
It's so good. It's so good. Portuguese food is good. Um, the quality of food is really good. If you buy food at the grocery store, it goes bad very quickly. It's not the United States where it lasts a long time. So you have to really plan what you're going to use the food for. And you can't really like stock up. I used to stock up on things living in the country, you know, you
Yep.
cannot stock up because it will go bad. But the food quality, very good. Like, oh, it's so good.
And it just shows too, like you're saying that, and I'm just kind of thinking, we're so used to like here we could go once a week and have everything, including meat and produce and everything, and it generally is lasts the week, maybe even longer. I
Yeah.
put it in the fridge. So it's just I'm kind of wondering like what is in our food that's allowing it to do that, right? It's definitely not natural then.
Yeah. It's crazy. And then you just can go like on our way to school, we pass like 3 or 4 fruit shops and they just have the local like seasonal produce sitting out and it's really inexpensive and it's really good. And you just spend like €2 and buy a bunch of snacks for the kids. And then you can just do that every couple of days so it doesn't go bad. But
Yeah. Yeah,
it's,
well, if it's that accessible too, it's not really, inconveniencing you to do it multiple times a week.
yes. Yeah, it's nice. Um, Last week the kids roasted chestnuts and it's like was a specific day. It was like one of the saints days and all the schools roast chestnuts and they build inside the school wall like school walls. The schools are like gated. Inside the gates they would build like a bonfire with the kids just hanging around and they roast the chestnuts and at the end the kids can jump over the fires. They were like wiping ash on their faces. Like I'm like this would never happen in
No,
America.
no.
Fire and things, no. But
Even
roasted
nuts. I
chestnuts
don't
are good.
know. Even just I don't even know. Our chest
Yes,
nut allergies and everything.
no idea. But
Huh.
they're really good. And I've never had a roasted chestnut, but
Okay.
it's delicious.
All right. So interesting. So moving forward, what is your plan? Like I mean, do you adopt like a long-term plan, 5, 10 year plan? Or are you kind of just seeing where the year goes? I mean, a year ago, you didn't even know you were going to be here right now. So it just shows how things change. But
Our goal, I don't think we have any plans to move anytime soon. We are really loving being here. Um, I think our goal is to stay here at least 5 years. And after 5 years, we can become dual citizens. And that will allow us to have access to the entire EU if we wanted to go do something like that. But I don't know if we'd even want to leave at that point just because we're enjoying it so much here.
and how about just something I was thinking, how about your family? Is everyone still back in Washington State or?
Yes, so the only person that moved with us was my dad. Um, and he retired when he moved here also. But yeah, my husband and my family are all back in the States. And that was probably the most difficult part of the move was taking the grandbabies
Mhm.
away. But they all have plans to come see us. My mother-in-law is actually coming in a few weeks and spending Christmas break with us. But yeah, that was hard. I think that they were going to come to Portugal and like it though. Maybe they'll move.
And it's a different world now too I mean, it's not the same, but having like FaceTime and things, it still does make it a very easy
Yes.
way to stay connected. And even here, I mean, you know, my kids are older than yours, and they're all in the thick of their what they're doing with their activities and things like that. And we have grandparents that live a drive away, half hour away. We don't see them all the time. I mean, we see them, I'm sure, more than we would if we lived overseas, but
Hmm.
no, you're not seeing this family all the time. So,
Yeah.
and now when you see them, it'll be like whatever, a week, a couple weeks, and it'll be really
Yeah.
quality time. So,
Yeah. We'll just squeeze all of the time into one time instead of spreading it out.
I mean, I've had that with friends where we live in the same town, somebody moved away, and it's almost like you see them more or connect with them
Hmm.
better because you kinda don't take them for granted anymore, when someone
Yeah.
lives around the corner, like, "Oh, whatever, I'll see them," and then you could one of my really good neighbors, like, I don't see her very often, we don't cross paths very much, everybody's working in different schedules, and so, it doesn't necessarily just your zip code doesn't necessarily mean that much with your
Yeah.
relationship, so just
Exactly.
more intentional. So, wow, just really interesting. As we wind down today, what are your parting thoughts to leave with everybody? Like, would you any regrets? Would you encourage other people if they're kind of thinking about doing this to take a shot at it?
I mean, I'm always someone who I feel like dreams big, and I come up with these crazy things that seem like there's no way you could ever do it, but you can. More often than not, it may seem crazy, but it's not as hard as you think it's going to be if you have the right mindset and it aligns with your family and your goals. I say do it. I have no regrets coming here. I kind of wish I would have done it sooner.
Wow,
And Portugal's amazing. And if you haven't visited, come visit Portugal.
it's making me want to come back for sure.
Do it. You can come stay with me. I have room.
I might. Wow. So why don't you let everybody know? I'll put in the show notes, but let everybody know where they can find you. I know you started an Instagram about your travels and your life over there. So why don't you share all that
Yes.
with everyone?
Okay, so that one I don't post as much on. Oh my god, I can't remember the name. Hold on.
Wandering through Portugal.
Yes, you can you can find me at Wandering Through Portugal on Instagram. Also, Front Porch Finances if you're curious about the financial aspect of retirement or living abroad. I share stuff on there also, and I have a website from porchfinances.com. If you are ever curious, if you ever want to learn more about your finances and simplifying your finances, those are the places that I like to hang out.
We'll share that with everybody. Everyone can check that out. And thank you so much for sharing your experience. And it's just really fascinating and interesting. And I'm so happy for you guys that you have followed your dream and it's working out for you. And it's a true inspiration to many of us.
Thank you.